What happened at Nashville Elementary School at Covenant Church was a horrible thing, but people are using it for their political ends, and that is despicable. There have been calls from LGBTQ corners for the release of the shooter's manifesto to not be released because they fear it would cause anger to be brought against trans people. They listen too much solely to the far-right wingnuts who blather instead of legislate. They say that what should be done is gun control. But, make sure these guns aren't available to people who have psychological problems that would turn them into a mass shooter. And I don't argue that point. I agree with that point. But what they miss in saying that is that the only way that can happen without infringing on the rights of every gun owner in America who is conscientious in handling firearms, securing firearms, is not something that they take into account. They say, well, we need red flag laws. Yes, definitely. But there's only one way red flag laws work, and that is if you can see signs in that person that will bring you to want to go to the police or go before the courts, because right now, the only way you can be denied access to a firearm, if you are not a felon in most states, is if you have been adjudicated to be incompetent. Your family or the police have gone before the probate courts, usually, and the judge has said, yeah, this person is not right in the head, and they shouldn't be allowed to have guns, and that goes into the record, and then when they go to try to buy a gun, that comes up on the computer, person doesn't get a gun. Simple enough. But some people can be contrarian without being a danger to society. A person can be a grump and not be antisocial. You have to know what is going on in the minds of people to know when to go to the courts and ask for help. But first you have to know the signs. And these people come up with, oh, well, this and this. No, it's not this vague thing or that vague thing. The only way you can learn this, and I don't mean the police have the resources to be able to figure this stuff out, but by the time the police get a hold of it or get a hold of a person, it's too late. The manifestos have to come out that these people leave behind so that the average citizen, the family member, the neighbor, the friend, can actually see the signs, see the similarities, and ask the right questions of them or of the police to know when somebody who is not right in the head is wanting to buy guns and maybe thinking about going off the rails. But we have to know what they think first. We have to know what the signs are, not vague signs. But a lot of the things that they say to look for are just that. They are vague. Somebody who is contrarian isn't necessarily dangerous. Somebody who is a permanent grump isn't going to be a mass killer. There are far more subtle things to look for. And the only way that people learn that is by looking at the writings that these people leave behind. Those are the real signs. Those are what people learn from. A 90-minute or 4-hour class in what to look for isn't going to give an individual the background they need. But if you can see what these people write, what they leave behind, what they say, then we can learn what to look for and to prevent this from happening again. But we have to know what they leave behind. We never get that when the shooters, the killers, the murderers survive, because their lawyers will tell them, don't talk to anybody, don't say anything, don't ever bring this up again to anybody, cellmates or anyone. So we never find out. Oh, the academics can find out after the trial when they're in prison. They go and interview them, and then they write some big paper or some book that is steeped in $500 words that the average citizen isn't going to be able to read and understand. But somebody like this is going to write stuff and put it out there, and they're not going to get into these big, long words that you've got to pull up Wikipedia to even hope to understand what it says. So, yeah, the manifesto has to be out there. Another thing that the gay community has brought up was, he wants to be called Aiden. No, pardon me. That individual is dead. The only way the police have to identify them is to go over, pull their wallet out, or find their car and run the plate and find out who it's registered to. If that person has not legally changed their name, it doesn't matter if Audrey Hale wants to be called Aiden. All they have is their legal name. And that's more more important in this case because that's the only thing that people know. If she changed her name, and I've had friends that have done that, it's their right, but until she's gone to court and changed her name, she's going to be Audrey. Right up to the point where she made 2 police officers, one a former Marine who has been in combat, which is probably a good thing because Marines are marksmen. They don't miss their targets, whether they're firing a rifle or a handgun. They don't miss what they're shooting at. And when you're inside a school building, a lot of those walls aren't concrete. It's a good thing there was somebody there who could put rounds down range on target and not run the risk of hurting anybody behind them. How many times have we heard 50 shots were fired? None of them hit the suspect. God help the houses around there and the buildings and the people. But like I said, the only thing the police have to go by is for naming a person is their legal identification, and that said Audrey Hale. If it had said Aiden Hale, the police don't know anything about this person until after they do investigations. In the heat of the moment or the days afterwards, nobody's going to know what's on that person's mind. A lot of people still don't know what's on that person's mind. It's a terrible thing that happened. You have, I don't know why they call it the Freedom Caucus, it ought to be called the Idiot Caucus on the Republican side, who are using this to run down people who are suffering from gender dysmorphia and don't know what they want to do. And then the LGBTQ community mouthpieces are going to say, this is, don't realize that's gonna be terrible. People are gonna know. All they hear are the people making the noise, the people playing to their base, and don't confuse that lunatic fringe with the majority of America. They don't represent us. They happen to come from districts where that's okay. They'll elect people like that, but the vast majority of the 435 districts in the House want nothing to do with people like that. Both Republican and Democratic districts want nothing to do with those lunatic nut jobs, and they won't vote for them. So they're worried about these blowhards and causing trouble for them. And the fact is, yeah, okay, I'll give you that there are going to be people that are going to say, well, she said I did this. And you know what? Doesn't matter. People that behave like that go after people, they're only using the politicians as an excuse to sanctify their actions. They would have done it anyways. They're just using these blowhards from Colorado and Georgia and Florida as cover for their own racist or homophobic violent tendencies. It's a terrible thing to happen. There are families now that are missing grandmother, grandfather, mother, children. Nothing's going to bring them back. For the left to have spoken out the day of the shootings to call for gun control, in my mind, that was beyond the pale. If you want to use it as a reason to push your agenda, okay, I'm fine with that. But let the families mourn first. Don't jump on something to push your agenda while the families are still in the very deepest depths of mourning and agony over their loss. They may come out and make appearances to help push your agenda. Not right now. They may not. They may totally disagree, but let them mourn. The left jumps on these cases as soon as they come out to call for gun control. The families are still in agony while this is going on. And there's always some idiot reporter who's going to ask them, do you agree with this? That's insufferable. And there's always going to be the ones on the right that call for guns in schools, arm the teachers, all this and that. My only problem with that thought is even trained police officers on occasion get their guns taken away from them by a suspect. Now, it's one thing to have somebody go through a Hogan's Alley shoot, don't shoot situation in training, but it's another thing altogether to expect them when they just have their back turned to a class to know that somebody's coming up behind them and that kid has got murder on their mind. You've just now made the situation worse because now they don't have to bring the gun into school. If they're even a semi-accomplished pickpocket, they're going to be able to take that gun and they're going to be able to start shooting. The first person they're going to shoot is the teacher they took it off of and the students in that classroom. That's the stupidest idea I ever heard. And like I said, for anybody who thinks that can't happen, go back and find out how many times in a scuffle a cop lost their gun. It happens, and they're trained to have that not happen. What are you going to do with a teacher who doesn't have that training? This is a terrible thing. I can't say that enough. I wish people would stop using it for these things for political ends. And honestly, I'm not going to say that there's too much access to guns because the government might be able to set standards on who can own a gun. But there's nothing that says that a gun store owner has to sell a gun to somebody they don't feel comfortable with. Somebody who just puts off a bad vibe to them. But we pushed this situation over the years to a point where everybody's afraid to get sued. So the gun store owner, as long as they pass the background check, they they get the gun even if they think the person is up to no good because they don't want to get sued. There didn't used to be a lot of shootings in schools. And all of that was because if we thought we had a kid in our family who was going off the deep end, we'd be able to get them help. We wouldn't be afraid. Children's Services used to be there to help the parents and the children, but the parents. Now the parents are afraid to ask for any help because they're afraid that they are going to end up in front of a judge for violating their children's rights because they wanted to have them put in an institution because they feel that they're a danger to themselves and others. The past, in a lot of ways, was the worst. That isn't one of them. The world today is rapidly becoming a place that I don't recognize. No one of my generation recognizes it. Now we treat everybody like a potential terrorist, and it's rapidly becoming a world that I don't want to live in. We have to be able to identify the people who are going to be the problems and get an idea what they're thinking, how they think, what pushes them over the edge, or what's pushing them toward the edge. I don't think anyone is completely irredeemable, but you have to know what the signs are to know when to get help, when to ask the right question. So we have to know what was going on in Audrey Hale's mind, so that where red flag laws exist, they can be used and used correctly. Good Lord knows that the families that have had to go through these losses think situations like this are devastated, really, for a long time. I'm sure that pain never goes away. Those parents of those 3 children, the families of those 3 adults, they're going to feel that pain until the day they die, especially the parents, because you're always going to wonder what could they have become. It's a terrible thing, and I'm sorry I've been rambling on here. You have a good day, and thanks for hearing me out.